Hey everyone, my name's Jeff. Welcome back to Jones Works. Today we're going to make this stand for my DeWalt table saw with onboard outfeed and storage down below. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Now let's get to the project. Alright, before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple things. As most of you know, this is actually the second time I've made one of these table saw stands. There was nothing wrong with the first stand, but a lot of you guys have requested a more detailed how-to video, so I decided to just make it from scratch and walk you guys through the building process. Now, since I'm building it from scratch, I did want to make a few changes. A couple things are that I made it a little wider and a little longer, and that's so I could have some room for some additional features that I'm planning on releasing in a part 2 of this series. Second, I decided to cut off the rounded edges on the 2x4s. That way, when you glue them together, you have a flatter surface. It's not perfect because I haven't run them through the planer or a jointer, but it's a little closer, and I decided to paint it so you can always hide your imperfections. I think that's about it, so let's get to the build. Alright, to begin, like I said, we're cutting off the rounded edges of the 2x4s. I think it'll give the final design a cleaner look, plus, if you choose to, it'll give you a smoother surface to be able to paint. After drilling pocket holes in all of the outside stretchers, you begin the assembly by clamping the outside stretchers to the legs and screwing them together. Now, depending on who you talk to, pocket hole screws for some reason seem to be looked down upon. I personally feel they're plenty strong for this application, and the true strength in this build comes when you glue the second layer of 2x4s together. You're essentially making half lap joints throughout this build, and that's where the strength is. We just finished the outfeed side legs. Now you just do the same thing for the short side. Now we're assembling the long stretchers to the legs. This probably would have been a whole lot easier on the floor. However, my garage floor is extremely uneven, so I thought I'd try to do this on my workbench. And to screw them to the other side, I just flipped it up on its end. Every piece in this project gets doubled up, essentially creating a half lap joint, which is super strong. I personally like to cut these to size as I go, so I know they are a perfect snug fit. The crucial inside pieces are the vertical ones, because not only is all of the weight resting on these, but they also ensure your outfeed is level, as well as the platform for your table saw is level. Using the physical length of the saw support stretcher, we'll make marks to locate the center bracket. As you can see here, the mark matches up with the center of this middle support, which is where these two 2x4s are glued together. Once that middle support is in place, you can get to work on the middle legs. The middle legs consist of a long leg on the outfeed side, as well as the short legs that will support the table saw platform. Now finally, the saw support stretchers can rest on top of those short legs. I spaced it, but when you're screwing in pocket screws, it's always nice to keep it all together with a clamp, as I do here. As we go, we're cutting our inside pieces to length and gluing those together. After finishing off the saw support, you will continue the middle leg, and this is what makes the middle leg a half lap joint. At this stage, I had to do a lot of forcing pieces into place because the wood I got was super twisted, and as much as you pick through that stuff, this is all I could find. So lots of clamps and lots of bending back into place. A quick note, the reason I'm only putting screws in the middle of these boards is to avoid hitting pocket screws. Now I'm screwing in the remainder of the Outfeed side legs, but this is where you can get creative if you like. These are all half lap joints, so instead of having one full piece here, you can make short pieces like on the saw support side and make shelves if you wanted to, or do whatever you want. This is where you can really make this your own. At this point, you're just filling in the remaining pieces. These are what weigh down the table and beef it up. It just makes it super strong. Now, after I sanded the entire frame, I decided to paint mine. This is totally unnecessary, but I decided I wanted it to look good. I really like this design, and I loved the first stand I made, so I just decided to make this one extra fancy. Now, this bottom shelf, I decided to recess in the frame, mostly because I painted it. You could just set a piece of plywood on top of the frame and it can be perfectly fine, but I'm just going to glue and nail in these cleats for it to rest on. And the last thing I do before I take it off the workbench is add some casters. I had a lot of comments in the last video about the middle casters that I'm adding. I personally don't wheel this against the wall. This usually sits out in the middle of my workshop. But if you need to wheel this up against your wall, those middle casters, you don't even need them. They just make it easier for me on my uneven floor. And here's that bottom platform fitting right in onto those cleats. Alright, now we're in the home stretch. Now that it's down on its casters, I'm cutting the Outfeed side and the saw support tables. Much easier to do with a circular saw than trying to wrestle this thing onto a table saw. And I set this straight edge way on the wrong side of the cut. Here I decided to go overboard with some pocket screws and enclose the section under the saw. I like to add a drawer underneath the saw so you could add a miter gauge or any other tools down there. It just gives you some extra storage and versatility, and you can get creative. You can add 2 drawers or a deep drawer, whatever you want to do. This is all up to you at this point. And this is what we're looking at so far. Time to add a drawer. I personally like to take the drawer sides apart and install the parts separately. I find it a lot easier that way. And when it comes to the drawer construction, this is as basic as you can get. These are all just butt joints and brad nails. This is as easy of a drawer as you can make, and this is just how I like to make my shop furniture. And if you haven't seen these clamps before, they're fantastic. I get them from Rockler. They're just friction fit clamps that are made perfectly for 3/4 inch plywood. They have them for 1/2 inch plywood too. They're not a sponsor, but I would recommend these clamps all day. and then just tacking on the base, and this is where you make sure your drawer is square. Now, I'm no Brad Rodriguez, but this was first try. Now for the drawer face, I like to use a couple playing cards to get some good spacing. I'll tack it on the inside with a brad gun and then permanently fix it with a couple of screws. And as far as a drawer pull, I personally just like to use a latch that fixes it into place. That way, with the vibration of the saw, it doesn't open on its own, which I have had happen on the previous stand. And that's gonna do it for part 1 of this build series. That's going to do it for this one. I decided to split up this series into 2 videos because if all you want to do is make a stand for your table saw, you could stop right here. This is perfectly serviceable on its own. It's very customizable. You can do whatever you want under the Outfeed side. You can do whatever you want with the drawer. You can make it your own. Mine is not complete, so I am going to do a couple more things in part 2. I'm gonna add a bunch of features and upgrade a few things. So if you want to stay up to date on this project, please subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you on the next project.